This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with James O'Brien.
Good morning, it's 3 minutes after 10 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC with you hopefully for the duration today. Many thanks. If you weren't listening, this will be brief and confusing, but if you were listening at this time yesterday, many thanks for all your words of kindness and concern. All is well now. But I would take a moment to remind you how magnificent and wonderful the NHS is, and sometimes you don't realise that until you need it. Here's a really interesting story, and it's not about British politics, it's about German politics. It involves the Alternative for Germany party, the far-right AfD, rose from the ashes in some ways of the Nazi movement, and certainly I think the invitation to Nigel Farage to speak to them a few years ago was issued by the daughter or the granddaughter of a senior Nazi. They've done some research into what supporting them does to your mental health almost. And it's really interesting. It's the first time it's been sort of established that switching to the support of a far-right party, in this case the AfD, might have a direct and sizable impact on voters' satisfaction with their lives. It is part of, in its simplest terms, the idea is that lurching to the far right makes you less happy. There's a real chicken and egg here, isn't there? Because you always imagine that people who are attracted to the lazy othering of far-right politics, the hatred of homosexuals or foreigners, people with different coloured skin or people from different countries, and somehow being persuaded to blame them for your dissatisfaction. You always presume that the level of dissatisfaction must already be quite high to make you susceptible to that sort of propaganda and rhetoric. It turns out we may have got this a little bit wrong. I don't know what tempts you there in the first place. If it's not dissatisfaction with your own life, it could just be simple fear of the unknown, I suppose. Simple and genuine, if you like, fear of the other. But when you get there, you become less happy. Partly, one has to presume, because you are exposed almost ceaselessly to negative rhetoric about the country's decline. The number of Twitter accounts I've stumbled across since Elon Musk bought the platform that just detail tirelessly and endlessly, like an infinite doom loop of crimes being committed by people who aren't white. And the whole point of these accounts is to persuade people that everybody who's not white is a criminal or a threat. And that, I think, is how you get to a place where somebody called Leslie Lilly, who is running as a candidate for Nigel Farage's party, has been talking about his desire to kill people arriving in a small boat in Dover. Comments reportedly from his Facebook page. I hope I'm near one of these scumbags one day. I won't run away. I'll slaughter them, then have their family taken out. Did he start off miserable, hate-filled and unhappy, or did he become miserable, hate-filled and unhappy after he signed up with Reform Limited and sent his subscription fee to Nigel Farage's party? I don't know, but I just couldn't help seeing the story about Germany in the context of what we're reading today and what we're learning today, and indeed, thanks to this remarkable investigation by Channel 4 News, what we're hearing today about Reform Limited, because we've been here before. We were here with UKIP. I can't remember whether we were here with the other party. The name temporarily eludes me. The one he set up that wasn't UKIP. Then he stood down all the candidates so that the Tories could win all the constituencies. And what was that one called? Was that the Brexit Party? So UKIP, the Brexit Party, Farage Fans Unite, Farage Only Fans, was that one of them? Only Farage Fans, Only Fans Farage? I forget. But anyway, whatever that one was called, I can't remember whether it happened with that because they weren't really around for long enough. But it's the term of Reform Limited now to sort of belch an almost unending avalanche of bigots and prejudices. I suppose you'd begin with the story from about 2 weeks ago, maybe only 3 weeks ago, which found that about 1 in 10 candidates for this outfit were friends on Facebook with a man who's trying to sort of resurrect Oswald Mosley's British Union of Fascists, the so-called new British Union, calling for a fascist revolution. I mean, listen, we've all made friends with people on Facebook, perhaps without doing due diligence and the proper amount of research. And one or two candidates signing up to this clown's outfit would perhaps be unfortunate, but forgivable. But when it's 1 in 10 of your entire roster, then the question of what is it about Nigel Farage's party that attracts fascists has to be a question that we turn our attention to. Inevitably, because this fella, Leslie Lilly, also described the COVID vaccine rollout as a crime against humanity. So you've got a selection of people who will believe anything, which brings us to the Channel 4 stuff, which was broadcast last night, this extraordinary interview or extraordinary undercover footage featuring a character called Andrew Parker saying things that I saw at least some supporters of Farage this morning saying that you'll hear in any pub in England, apparently you'll hear people describing Rishi Sunak as the P word. As you know, if you listen to this programme on a relatively regular basis, I spend quite a lot of time in pubs. I can confidently say I've never heard anybody use the P word. I suppose the only way you could state with absolute certainty was that people use the P word routinely in pubs, is if you're the person that routinely uses the P word in pubs. Most pubs would get you barred, that kind of behaviour, not least because increasingly the hospitality sector is being propped up by people from the subcontinent. But this chap, Andrew Parker, is on a website somewhere touting for work as a film extra or as describing himself as an actor. There's no evidence anywhere that he's ever done any work as an actor or earned a crust as an actor. Perhaps he has, I don't know. But the kind of people who believe, as Leslie Lilly, this candidate, believes that the COVID-19 vaccine rollout was a crime against humanity, will absolutely believe that Channel 4 found an actor on a website and that you could discover just on a simple Google search and decided to pay him to pretend to be a racist in the hope that nobody would actually notice that he was really an actor. So conspiracy theories are already out there. Where racism leads, conspiracy theories always follow. And we haven't even scratched the surface yet, really, because we've got the bloke from the BNP who has been chucked out of the party, although it's hard to see what he subscribes to, that the 41 people who are friends with the fascist leader on Facebook would also subscribe to. This is a character called Raymond Saint, who was on that list of British National Party members that was leaked in 2009. You also had that attempt by Farage to pretend that somehow these are working class values, or racism and bigotry are working class principles, somewhat conveniently overlooking the fact that Oswald Mosley went to Winchester College. So, you know, the idea that racism is confined to the lower orders is not only racist, it's also incredibly snobbish. But on we go. Here is Andrew Parker, the activist in Clacton, where a full list of candidates is available at lbc.co.uk/candidates, being filmed secretly by Channel 4 News in a programme that was broadcast last night. What you need to know about this, or what I think you should really focus on, is the fact that he is supremely comfortable sharing these views in the company of anybody else who's signed up to canvass for Reform Limited. So even if you hold these views, and I can usually judge by my inbox that I still have a few people listening who do subscribe to these views, you wouldn't say them to people that you just met. You know, even the days, and I love the London taxi trade, but the days of getting into the back of a London taxi and setting your clock by the amount of time it would take the driver to say something horribly racist, even those days are over now. When I first moved to London years ago, that was a relatively, not by any means tarring the entire cab trade with this brush, but it was a relatively common occurrence on the subject of immigration that a taxi driver would say something to you that was pretty grim, actually. Let's not beat about the bush. But these days it doesn't happen. You need to be supremely confident that you're in the company of people who will either share your prejudices or be untroubled by them. And I don't know what it is about Nigel Farage's various bandwagons that creates this atmosphere that allows people like this to think that because they're all wearing the same rosette, because they're all members of Nigel Farage's OnlyFans, they must also be perfectly comfortable with language like this?
I know Nigel.
Oh, do you? Right.
Yeah, I met him in a restaurant in London.
Yeah.
About 2 years ago. He's rung me a couple of times. I've texted him. I've always been a Tory voter in the Thatcher days. Annoys me big time. They've just become the same as the Labour Party. There's we got in. What's good is he? All they're interested in doing is taking over, changing everyone to be a Muslim. You see, what the Islamics want, and it's horrendous, really. It is. Sick, mate. Sick. It's a cult. I'll tell you what, if you don't know about Islam, it's the most disgusting cult out. Emphasise illegal, especially if you open the door to a bunch of I've got DO11 here, and all the place near Dover, army recruitment. Get the young recruits there, with guns on the beach, target practice, just shoot them.
And then you have another character, this one called George Jones, who seems to be quite a close ally of Nigel Farage, sharing his views on, he's in fact described as a senior aide. He was in UKIP and the other party. He's been in all three bandwagons. And he had some interesting things to say about both people who are not white or indeed police officers showing support for gay rights.
You see that degenerate flag on the front bonnet? What the old Bill doing promoting that crap? He's about catching nonsense, not promoting. Our police officers will be paramilitaries, they won't be police. We're going to bring back the news.
Bring back the news, conflating homosexuality with paedophilia. And there's more, there's always more. But the question then becomes, and one more thing that's really interesting. Hope Not Hate have done some great work in this field, showing that various truly far-right organisations, Britain First, Patriotic Alternative, Homeland, all urging, and even little Tommy Ten Names, who's currently, of course, holed up in Canada, I think, all urging their supporters to vote for Nigel Farage's Reform Limited. So what is it about Nigel Farage that attracts so many racists? 0345 6060 973. Something quite interesting happened when Richard Tice made way for him, is they stopped chucking people out of the party. Hope Not Hate Hope Not Hate's a wonderful organisation, the founder of which is the guest on this week's Full Disclosure, Nick Lowles, which is an amazing listen. You'll remember the recent ITV drama showing the work they did in preventing the assassination of a member of Parliament, a crime for which somebody is currently serving decades in jail. What changed? They stopped chucking people out. And when Hope Not Hate started doing the kind of vetting and due diligence that you'd think the Reform Limited might have done themselves, they started, under Tice, they started chucking people out of the party. And a lot of Farage fans started complaining. It was really interesting. They were furious that people were getting chucked out of the party for saying racist things, or for being bigoted or prejudiced or overtly Islamophobic or homophobic. They were furious. They were sort of accusations that Hope Not Hate was running the party. So one big change since Richard Tice, and I don't know about you could almost feel sorry for Richard Tice if he wasn't such a flan. But the difference in the party that he was trying to construct in a vaguely respectable way compared to the party that Farage presides over, where he doesn't really chuck these characters out. He just makes excuses for them or pretends that they speak for non-public school educated bigots. It's absolutely fascinating. So, first question is, what is it about Nigel Farage that attracts so many racists, Islamophobes, and fascist sympathisers? 0345 6060 973. Hit the numbers now, you will get through.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 20 minutes after 10 and it is almost impossible to keep track. I'm sure there are a few that I have missed out, but once again, the Farage bandwagon buckles under the weight of bigots, racists, Islamophobes, homophobes, the BNP members, although he has apparently been dropped as a candidate. And the question remains, what is it about his public persona that attracts so many people like this? Okay, I want you to tell me, especially if you're attracted to him, Why do you think, because I presume you don't see yourself as a racist, as a homophobe, as Islamophobic, bigoted, prejudiced, any of those things, fascist? You don't sign up to be a friend of the leader of the British Union of Fascists 2.0 unless you're sympathetic with their views. At least I don't think you do. What is it they see that you don't see? Or what is it that you see that they don't see? What attracts people to this peculiar brand of hatred, of bigotry? Henry is in Stanton St John in Oxfordshire. Henry, what would you like to say?
Hi, morning.
Hello.
I've had two incidences recently, one with a taxi driver in Paris and one with a bus driver in London, where they've completely gone into a mad rant about Clintons eating babies, about immigrants being told by Biden to kill us all in the night. I mean, complete madness. And yes. Farage and his pals are fascists. There's no doubt about it. They want to live in a white world where no one is different. And I just think it's worse than the 70s in a way. People are more fundamental in their views. It's not as obvious, but it's still there.
If you have a senior aide, someone who's worked with him for the longest time, this George Jones character, talking about replacing the police with paramilitaries and bringing back the noose,
yes.
you presumably will be less shocked than others if you've already bought into the idea that the F word is both fitting and appropriate in this context.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. But I can't understand why people don't see that Farage is a very stupid racist.
I don't think he's stupid, is he? I mean, he's
my cousin was a stockbroker with him. My cousin is the stupidest man on the planet. He said Farage was even stupider than him.
Well, the plural of anecdote is not data, Henry, of course. but he's clearly very good at what he does.
He's
isn't
very
he?
good at speaking. He's very good at.
So he can't be
on camera.
Let's say he's better at this. He's better at attracting racists than he is at being a stockbroker. So we could then agree that perhaps the skill set you need for one is different than the skill set you need for the other. To evolve the conversation slightly.
Yeah.
You see things very clearly. Some people listening may disagree with you, but what about somebody? I heard the previous candidate in Clacton being interviewed today, and he was quite persuasive about his disdain for the duopoly of the political system, a genuine desire to see new voices introduced into politics. I presume he was sincere when he spoke at his disgust at what had gone on in Clacton since he was replaced by Nigel Farage. I have no reason to doubt what he said. Is it possible people can be attracted to this without being any of the things that you've just said, or any of the things that this long list of disgraced candidates represent?
Absolutely not. He's lying. They all think the same thing.
How do you know that?
Well, I don't know it, but that's what I believe. And I think the reason
And that's what he's very good at then. He's very good at leaving no doubt in the minds of both his critics and his fans that he's fully on board with what these characters have been busted or secretly filmed saying. But he somehow manages to walk that tightrope of never quite giving it away or never quite going there.
Absolutely.
Publicly.
Keep everyone on side. But let's have a look. Let's have a look next Thursday. I don't think Reform will do terribly well, actually.
I think they'll get some seats, but I don't know for sure. But I don't know. It might be his worst nightmare to be a sort of irrelevance on the back benches whose flush has been busted once again.
Absolutely.
I don't know. So I don't know if I wonder if anyone would ring me to say I like this guy and I like this party, but I am none of the things that Henry has just described. I'm none of the things that these characters have just professed. I'm absolutely disgusted. I don't quite see how you could accidentally end up in bed with the man calling Rishi Sunak the P word, the man claiming that we're going to turn the police force into paramilitaries, describing homosexuals as paedophiles. I just there's too much of it, isn't there, to be a coincidence? Or can you make that case? 0345 6060973 is the number you need. Thank you, Henry. Regards to your cousin. Howard says Nigel Farage is certainly not stupid. His talent is appealing to people who are. I said, I don't know. Certainly he has that talent, but is everybody he appeals to stupid? Didn't the fella that used to own Newcastle United turn up as a supporter this week, Sir John Hall? I guess making a ton of money isn't necessarily a sign of intelligence, but it's not quite the knuckle-dragging Neanderthal of stereotype, is it? Rod's in Halifax. Rod, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello.
Good morning.
Hello.
Look, I am a Brazilian living in the UK, and I'm looking at this from the outside.
Okay.
Historically, UK on the 1800s, on the 1700s, has been a great country. It's been an empire, the British Empire. We ruled the world, and we had many powers. And then comes the Second World War. We won the war, and that's that nostalgia of the country coming together. But the world changed, and there is a decline in UK. Other countries catch up. There's technology. So Nigel Farage appeals to that decline, saying the reason we're not that empire anymore, the reason we don't stick together, like when we won the war, is because of the migrants, is because of multiculturalism. So he plays on that frustration of an apparent decline of British society. And I think that attracts people because they will say, I don't speak with my neighbor anymore, or I don't recognize my high street anymore. And he plays on the frustrated people, and I think it's a very dangerous place to be.
He never quite says the things that you've just put in his mouth, though, does he? Well, I suppose he talks about not wanting to live next door to Romanians or being dismayed by people speaking foreign on trains. He never quite goes where you've just gone explicitly, but clearly in the minds of his followers, he's going there every day implicitly. It's quite a talent, that.
I think he is a frustrated man in himself. He is a man who hasn't achieved much. And he was going to go to America to support Trump. And he is an opportunist who just came back and say, right, there is an opportunity here to, spread hate. I believe people are starting to waken up and saying, look, the world changed. The world's a more competitive place now. People are not looking. Let's stop looking at the past. Yes, great empire. We stick together to the war. It was an amazing, but let's look forward. It's great to have a Romania.
And this is all about looking backwards. This is all about a sort of mythical golden age that can't really be resurrected, but which he keeps promising he can resurrect. The bit I don't quite get about this analysis, which obviously I kind of agree with a lot of it, is that almost every country under the sun had an empire, if you go back far enough. I mean, that we had the Roman Empire, Spain had a massive empire, France had colonies all over the place, Portugal had a massive empire. It's why you probably speak the languages you speak.
I do. I do.
And I don't see in those countries quite the same level of what you might call wistful clock back to, that's not a very good phrase, wistful nostalgia, this sort of nostalgia for a bygone age of world domination. I don't see it in other countries that had an equal claim to having dominated the world.
I know. And this is the concern, because people want to have cheap services in London. People want to send the elderly to a home care. Everybody wants to have a cheap pint on the weekend.
Yes.
But no one wants to acknowledge that a migrant is willing to work on a Saturday, 2:00 in the morning, to deliver your Chinese. And we don't value that. A migrant is willing to help for an elderly person earning a very low salary, and he is happy for that. And why we are making...
be even happier with a higher salary. So I mean, we could cut this both ways. Speaking of numbers, how many people do you think were dropped as candidates for Reform Limited between January and June this year? The stories that haven't made the news, the stories making the news are the candidates that are still there. Have a go. How many do you think?
I think it was 40. Is that
110, mate. 110 candidates were dropped or swapped between January and June of this year, mostly over public comments that came to light only after their appointment. So what is it that attracts people to this party? When Richard Tice was in charge, they wouldn't be allowed to stay. It looks largely as if now that Nigel Farage is in charge again, they are allowed to stay. What is it that attracts them to him? Rod, thank you. 10:30 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Thomas Watts is here now with your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 10:34 and you're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I mean, it's a rhetorical question in a way, as Rob points out in this text, that says if you blow enough dog whistles, you end up surrounded by dogs. But we haven't gone where France has gone and where, to a lesser extent, Germany has gone, or indeed where Donald Trump has gone. And we're going to talk about the unsustainability of Joe Biden's candidacy in the final hour of the programme today. The headlines, if you haven't watched it or seen clips of the debate between him and Donald Trump last night, the headlines are accurate. The American media is not like the UK media, with exceptions like Fox News. But generally speaking, they pride themselves on objectivity. And when they describe Biden's performance last night as catastrophic, they are not exaggerating. I don't currently see how he can be the presidential candidate for the Democrats at the next election in America. I don't see it. It doesn't matter that Donald Trump can't open his mouth without lying. The fragility of Joe Biden is, sadly, for good or for ill, it's a bigger deal. We'll have a look at that in the final hour of the programme today, all being well. I wonder how many times I'm going to add an all being well after making little predictions of what is coming up later in the programme. But he's got a point. Adam puts it a little more robustly. The answer is quite simple. Flies are attracted to excrement. Sorry if that's so blindingly obvious that it removes the need for further discussion this hour. And Joe in Birmingham, again, adopts a slightly milder approach to the same idea. He says, what draws racists to Farage's political parties? Probably the racists running the parties. Birds of a feather flock together and all that. 10:35 is the time. But when I say we haven't gone where France has gone, it's not explicit in the way that it is in France. Some of the rhetoric being pursued by the National Assembly, the former National Front in France, it is entirely of a piece with the people who in the UK still get hauled over the coals by elements of our media. And certainly when Richard Tice was leader of Reform Limited, or nominally leader, they would have been thrown out of the party. They wouldn't be thrown out now, many of them. Well, they're not being thrown out now. They're not losing their support in their constituencies. And there's a lot of COVID conspiracy in there. There's a lot of climate change denial in there. It's all sort of a piece. And what is it about Nigel Farage that makes these people think he's our guy? He's our guy. 10:36 is the time. Jack's in St Austell. Hello, Jack. What's on your mind?
How's it going, James?
All good, mate.
I just think it's the main thing is that to be a candidate, you don't have to, you're not going to be picking apart complex economic policy, looking at housing policy, trying to sort, complex social issues. You're running as a candidate on one thing. And that is immigration. You're thinking that you can help the country by just platforming yourself on one thing. There's no critical thinking there. And I think, these thoughts have always been in that small percentage of the population's mind. And now you've got a guy shouting their inner thoughts from the rooftops and is getting, a not insignificant amount of support from the general public.
He doesn't go where, does he go where the National Assembly in France go? I mean, he talks in much broader brushstrokes, doesn't he, about threats and discomfort. He doesn't actually, and then the people that believe they know what he really means come out and say what they say what they think that he really means. They come out and say it explicitly, and they don't understand why their faces ended up all over even the Daily Mail this morning. That's the thing. That's, I guess, his trick, is that he makes people believe that he is entirely in agreement with them without ever quite going as far as they subsequently go themselves.
Yeah, and I think, he's not a stupid guy. He knows what he's doing. He knows that he can't say the quiet bits out loud, but
he also knows now, and this is the contrast between him and Tice, he also knows now that he can't really afford to discipline the ones who do. Because then the whole project begins to teeter, doesn't it? If you chuck out everybody who's come out with stuff like, you'd have to get rid of his senior aide for conflating homosexuality with paedophilia. Who would be left if he starts chucking out everybody who has been attracted to him because they think he shares their disgusting views? There'd be nothing left. And that explains the interesting development in this election campaign, which is the pivot from Tice's, I would say, sincere determination to get rid of everybody of that ilk to Farage's need to keep them on board. Needs to keep them on board.
And I think, he's banged on about, that they were a pressure group before, and that's why he wasn't, successful in elections. And now he's Tice is trying to make it into a political party, a competent political party. And, he's trying to do some form of growing up. People are going to have to be kicked out if they say things that politicians cannot say. And Farage isn't quite there yet. He's got, if he wants it to be a,
can't be there, because who's left though? If it doesn't do the dog whistles, what is there left to do?
Exactly. And that's the whole platform he's running on. So he's in a catch-22 where he can't be kicking out all the people that are believing what he's saying, but at the same time, you're not going to be taken seriously as a political force if you don't kick out the people that are, saying overtly racist, misogynistic things. He's basically stuck. He's got to...
Until we're ready, until we, and I use the word very loosely, until we are ready to put the overtly racist, misogynistic, homophobic things into the public space, as Donald Trump has managed to do. This country, oddly, despite Brexit and despite this fella, hanging around like an unflushable object, this country hasn't quite gone there. And despite, of course, his big mate, Steve Bannon, saying you should wear the accusation of racism proudly, we still haven't quite reached that point in this country, have we? No,
and this country has the very kind of the snidey, horrible undertones of racism, with never quite saying it overtly. You were speaking to a lady who, a couple of weeks ago, whose friend from school was sort of said, "You're not from here." That's and right, you wouldn't know. You would never understand Brexit because you're not really British. Yeah, it's that kind of thing of, the racism is just always suggested. It's never just explicitly said. So it's he's trying to do that, without saying the
exactly. I think in some ways, thank you, Jack. Take care. How's trade? Because there's a big story about hospitality around at the moment, and struggle for staff. Are you still in that space?
I'm not at the minute, but a lot of my sort of friends and family are, and it's tough. I think it's it's tough jobs for
summer is going to be tough circumstances. Summer is going to be a pinch point. I think 10:41 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where the question remains: what is it that attracts these type of characters to Nigel Farage? And some of the answers might be obvious, but some of them are worth looking at. And this fascinating pivot on why they were getting chucked out of the party when Richard Tice was in charge, and they're not getting chucked out now, I think is really quite illustrative of a bigger change in British politics. But I don't know. The more we talk, the more I wonder whether the comments of George Jones, the senior aide, because you can chalk this Andrew Parker character up as, albeit that he's wearing the rosette and he's been out canvassing and he's very comfortable in the company of lots of other Reform Limited subscribers. He's very comfortable talking about shooting young migrants. He's very comfortable calling Rishi Sunak the pejorative word that begins with P for people of South Asian extraction. He's very comfortable talking about kicking all the Muslims out of the mosques and turning them into Weatherspoons. You could Farage would be able to sort of say, well, it's terrible that we've got people like this. I have no idea what first attracted the massive racist Andrew Parker to me, Nigel Farage. But his closest aide, or one of his closest aides, this George Jones character, I think actually the stuff he has said, he runs the event, so he's right in the thick of it. He's right in the room where it happens, and he's talking about proper England and proper English. I think that's exactly what Jack was talking about. I think I got Jack in St Austell mixed up with another Jack in Cornwall at the end there, if that conversation went a bit confusing. This character here, this George Jones character, he is saying exactly what our caller's friend said after Brexit, because she had some Indian heritage. She was Anglo-Indian, and he said, you'll never understand Brexit because you're not properly English. You're not English. You're not really English. He says proper England. He talks about, you know what I mean, proper English. I do know what they mean. They just mean too many people around that don't look like them. He even said, not like in London when you're a foreigner in your own country. Well, mate, I live here. You're not. And if you say hello to someone, they look like they're about to effing knife you in the face. They really don't. But if you're marching around thinking that these people are inferior or subhuman or dangerous, I don't know, maybe every finger you point at someone else, 3 fingers are pointing back at you. I wonder whether this guy is actually more significant. The one comparing homosexuals to paedophiles, the one talking about proper England and proper English. What do you think he means by that? If not exactly the same as our Brexit voting friend who told his lifelong friend that she wouldn't understand Brexit because she wasn't proper English, or she wasn't actually English. Have another listen to this, because this guy runs events for Farage's campaign. This guy was in UKIP. This guy was in the other one, the Brexit Party. This guy is absolutely joined at the hip to Nigel Farage. So this is the kind of conversation that you have to conclude is perfectly permissible in the inner circle.
You see that degenerate flag on the front bonnet? What the old bill doing promoting that crap? It's about catching nonsense, not promoting. Our police officers will be paramilitaries. They won't be police. We're going to bring back the news.
Just listen to that again, and then listen to that story I opened the show with today about the AFD.
You see that degenerate flag on the front bonnet? What the old bill doing promoting that crap? It's about catching nonsense, not promoting. Our police officers will be paramilitaries. They won't be police. We're going to bring back the news.
So some research in Germany showing that turning to the far right can make you markedly unhappier, because it sort of puts you on a drip feed, an unleavened diet of hatred and rhetoric about your own country's decline. I wonder whether he'd be a case study.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 10:49. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. There's so many of them, isn't there? So I thought when we were talking about this character, George Jones, who is comparing homosexuality to paedophilia and calling for the return of the noose and promising that in the event of Reform Limited achieving power, they would replace the police with paramilitaries. Sounds all very familiar, doesn't it? And crucially talking about proper England, denying or claiming that proper England no longer exists. And when you look around, you don't see proper English. He's a senior aide. I wondered whether it was another bloke called George who knocks around with Farage, who was jailed for serious fraud not long ago. But no, it's a different George, although the one that was jailed for serious fraud is back in the inner circle as well. So, you know, they'll hang out this Andrew Parker character as some sort of fringe extremist, but in the inner circle itself, you've got two people with the same blooming Christian name, who are perhaps evidence of what it is about Nigel Farage that convinces some of these poor saps to send him money and canvass for him and go out and campaign for him. What else can we add to the list of, in the spirit of Mrs. Merton, what first attracted you to this party full of racists? Tom's in Leeds. Tom, what would you like to say?
Morning, pal.
Hello,
what a depressing 24 hours it's been, mate, with the presidential debate and everything that's going on.
Yes.
And all this stuff coming out. I mean, to me, obviously, Reform have been canvassing in Clacton for a long time. And it was interesting to see that the people on the doorstep who will have come into contact with Reform quite a lot were not surprised by what was being said to them. And also, George Jones is sort of the key to this thing. I think you hit the nail on the head, because people feel comfortable saying this stuff around him.
Proper English.
We have that on camera now. Yeah,
Proper English.
And he doesn't push back. You know, it's obviously not the first time he's heard it, and he joins in, like you say, and he's right at the centre of this. I think it will absolutely, to me, show what were the conversations that go on behind closed doors, as far as I'm concerned. If there was any shock or outrage on his part, or any pushback with him being in the top circle, but there wasn't at all.
It's a failure of questioning as well, I suppose, although I think Nick Robinson did a good job finally last weekend. And indeed, I heard someone on the BBC today put it to the former candidate in Clacton that the party was full of racists. I wish they'd used that language and had the guts to talk like that years ago, it would have saved us all a hell of a lot of problems. But the failure to say, what do you mean? There's no debate. What does this man mean when he says proper English? There's no debate, is there? There's no analysis that allows something in that's not racist.
Well, but he doesn't need to. He doesn't need to do that, does he? Because he's got his core base. People who agree with him understand what he means, so he doesn't need to explain himself. And he can't chuck out the people who say this stuff, because the core base, as we saw with some of the Hope Not Hate successes, the core base would be furious. Yeah, exactly that. You've hit the nail on the head.
Well, that's the bit that's missing from a lot of the analysis, is that he can't chuck them out like Tice. I don't know how much of the programme you've listened to today, but I think you could possibly accuse me of sounding like I almost feel sorry for Richard Tice this morning.
I always listen to your programme in its entirety, James. I don't know what you're saying.
Well, do I sound as if I almost feel sorry for Richard Tice?
No, I don't think you do, mate. I think you caveat well, like you did with Rishi Sunak as well. You caveated that one.
Yeah, well, that's true. I'm not. I'm in danger of beginning to feel sorry for someone. You're listening far too closely, Tom. Thank you. 10:53 is the time. So I think that now, under Farage, the only circumstances in which you'll have your candidacy dropped is if it is proved that you used to be a member of the BNP. So let's run with that for a bit. And I got a couple of texts saying that I'd forgotten about the Breaking Point poster that he unveiled, of course, redolent, dripping with Nazi imagery, that Breaking Point poster that he unveiled on the day that Joe Cox was murdered by a fascist terrorist, by a far-right racist terrorist. And of course, what that terrorist shouted as he murdered Joe was Britain First. And there is an organisation, I don't know if you know, called Britain First, which is unapologetically far-right, and its leader has urged his supporters to vote for Farage's party. So why would this character urge his supporters to vote for Farage's party? Why would little Tommy Ten Names? Some extraordinary allegations circling around his troubled visit to Canada. I don't know how many of them you've seen, but why would he want people to vote for Nigel Farage? What is it about Nigel Farage that attracts people like the leader of Britain First and little Tommy Ten Names, and also organisations like Patriotic Alternative and Homeland? I mean, avowedly fascistic, hard right, far right organisations in some cases. It's a mystery, isn't it? David's in Woodbridge, or is it? David, what would you like to say?
Yeah, you're asking the question, why are people possibly attracted by Farage?
No, fascists. Why are fascists attracted by Farage?
Yeah. Okay. Now, the thing is, I'm not a fascist. I've never voted Conservative in my life, a lot of Labour. But what I've seen from Farage in the last few weeks, few months, and I wasn't a Brexiteer, is that he asks certain questions that the mainstream is not doing. And you alluded to the guy from Clapton saying there is a duopoly going on. And
Ed Davey says that.
Yeah, and there's a Reform Party there is prepared to ask questions that aren't being asked. Now,
like what?
I know he got hammered last week when he suggested that the Ukraine war could have been provoked. And it's a bit wider than just Putin being an absolute idiot.
No, he said that Putin had been provoked into invading the sovereign territory of Ukraine by the expansion of the European Union and NATO, which is not only disgusting, it's also blatantly wrong.
Well, there's a debate there to be had.
No, there isn't.
Okay.
The EU doesn't expand. Sovereign countries vote to join it, just like sovereign countries vote to leave it. Which he spent his entire life campaigning for, the right of a sovereign country to vote to leave the European Union. How can he have a problem with countries voting over their future relationship with the European Union when his entire life is built on it?
Yeah, true, I grant that. But
so let's try another example then of the things he says that are attractive, because that one hasn't worked, has it?
Okay, when we think about fascism, we relate it back to...
No, we're talking about what's attracted you to him, David.
Yeah, well, I'm just coming to that.
Oh, good.
If it's okay, James. When it comes to fascism, we sort of relate it back to the crimes against Jewish people in Nazi Germany. That is a classic encapsulation of fascism in our memories. Now, fascism today is going on with Keir Starmer and Sunak in supporting the invasion of Israel. Now, someone like Farage would be prepared...
Who's invaded Israel?
Invading Gaza, I apologise.
Right.
And Starmer.
So you think Farage is against Israeli actions in Gaza?
Those actions.
Have you got any proof of that?
Yeah, I've heard him speak and say, should we really be in those parts of the world supporting it?
You've heard Farage question Israelis' response to the October the 7th terror attack?
Yes.
We both know you haven't.
But
let's just be clear that you haven't, shall we? Because otherwise we're in sort of slightly choppy waters.
Okay, but
So what you said about Ukraine was complete rollicks, and what you've said about Israel...
No, it wasn't, because you didn't let me debate that about Ukraine. You just said it was right...
the EU can't expand. The countries can vote to join it.
Just getting back to your...
No, let's get back to Nigel Farage's comments about Israel. Can we agree he never said the things you just said he said?
Okay.
So let's move on to your third point.
Okay, well, my point is that why you're asking the question, why are people...
Fascists.
Why? I'm not a fascist.
You've said that a few times. But what's your third point of attraction?
That's my point. I'm not a fascist. But
very few. I mean, the whole point of this phone is that no fascist ever says they are a fascist. But what do you think attracts fascists to Nigel Farage?
The big immigration talk,
right.
The use of the language, invasion, speed, we're being taken over and all that kind of stuff. And that is a tactic that he'll use, and you said it at the beginning, he's very good at this kind of work, probably far better at doing this than he was as a stockbroker. But he can communicate very well with the British public on those things.
No, I mean, not the British public. You're looking at best between 15 and 20% of the British public, which you could loosely describe as the racists or the fascists.
Yeah, and that could...
But David Cameron used the word swarm. I mean, they all use the word invasion. Even some Labour politicians have flirted with that kind of rhetoric. So what is it about? Do you think the difference is that when Farage talks like that, they think he really means it? He hates the foreigners as much as they do.
Is it about hating? Or
yes, it is.
Is it? So you'd say 15-20% of the British public are fascist?
I'd say that they have fascist sympathies, fascist tendencies. Yeah, I think every population has that.
Well, on
otherwise they'd never win, would they? They'd never take over anyway.
We're actually activating fascism today in Israel with our government supporting the Israeli response to Gaza.
You're jumping around quite a lot. We've already established that Farage hasn't said anything like what you claimed that he said, and you're comparing the Israeli government to the Nazis now.
They're being taken to the court of international justice.
No, just to be clear, that's what you're doing. You're comparing this. So you've come on to explain why people are attracted to Nigel Farage, and you've ended up comparing the Israeli government to Nazis.
They're being taken to the court.
What else have you got? What else is in the diary for today?
What do you mean?
Well, I'm just wondering how you're going to top this. It's only 11 o'clock.
What's wrong? I'm making a point.
Well, I mean, many people will tell you. I can't let that stand. You can't compare Israel to the Nazis, even if you think that it's true. I have no choice but to dismiss that as a disgusting comparison. You could use the word ethnic cleansing. You could even remind us of the genocide investigations being undertaken in the international court. But to compare Israel to the Nazis, and final question, actually...
No, am I allowed to speak?
Yeah, of course you are, but only in answer to the questions that I ask. What's this got to do... What's your belief that Israel are like the Nazis got to do with Nigel Farage?
What? Right, so you're asking me a question, you're asking me to think on my feet. What's it got to do with
we all
Nigel?
have to do that. Yeah. You've brought it up. The phone-in is about Nigel Farage. You've compared Israel to Nazis. Okay. I'm just wondering what they've got to do with each other.
Okay, and as a wider way of looking at it, it's okay to call Farage a fascist.
Yes.
And his followers a fascist. My point is Sunak and Starmer are no... In fact, they're actually worse, because they're activating and supporting the genocide by not opposing it. And the best person to vote for... Well,
they are opposed. They are. I mean, Starmer is opposing it. But the point is that because of Gaza...
He did not call for a ceasefire. You know that.
Well, he has called for a ceasefire.
He didn't straight after the 9th of October.
Because he didn't think there should be a ceasefire. He thought Israel had a right to respond. It's the 7th of October.
he supported it. Now he's saying we should stop it.
Because they responded and he decided that they'd gone too far, just as Rishi Sunak did. But I still don't understand why we're talking about this in a phone-in about Nigel Farage. You're saying that because of...
You can get angry with me, James.
I'm not angry. I'm profoundly amused. Why are we talking about this in the conversation about Nigel Farage?
You can call Farage a fascist, but look at Sunak.
I didn't actually call him a fascist. I asked what attracts him to... What is it that attracts fascists to him?
Fascism in Israel.
But what's that got to do with Nigel Farage?
Well, this is a wider discussion. We're in an election period,
yes,
and we're trying to work out what's right and what's wrong. You can sit on your chair calling him a fascist, but why don't you point the finger at other people as well? I will never vote for Farage. I will never vote Reform, but he does ask questions.
What questions? What questions? Apart from the question about Ukraine that we've established was wrong.
No, you've established.
No, you've established it was wrong. You cannot expand the EU. You can simply vote... Okay,
Gorbachev, in 1989, with Thatcher and Reagan, agreed on the wall coming down, provided that the NATO expansion didn't take place.
That's not actually what happened, and that's not what Farage was referring to. He was referring to the...
Get out your binary way of thinking.
Okay, I will.
And being prepared to be a bit more nuanced.
Okay, and before you go, what is it about Nigel Farage that attracts so many fascists?
What is it? Because he knows how to manipulate on the immigration thing. We think of fascism going along with race and genocide. Okay, when he starts to use that emotive language, people get drawn to it, and then you start using the English terminology of English values and all that kind of thing.
So why didn't we start with that? It would have been a much more friendly conversation.
I'm not here to make friends, James. I'm here to make a point of the hypocrisy that is going on in mainstream politics, and you're going along with it, James.
Because I'm not comparing Israel to the Nazis. Because I'm not comparing Israel to the Nazis, just to be clear.
But what Starmer and Sunak have done is fascist. They've supported Israel in a genocide.
And I still don't know what that's got to do with the phone-in about Nigel Farage, who has said none of the things about Israel that you claim that he has said. But at least we agree on the nature of manipulation. 4 minutes after 11 is the time.
James O'Brien on LBC.
8 minutes after 11. Just for the record, I categorically am here to make friends. And there's quite a good opportunity to do so next. David Lammy has made some interesting comments about the ruling class, if you like. And when he uses that phrase, unlike some of the characters we were talking about in the last hour, he's actually talking about real people. He's talking at least about a sort of identifiable caucus of people. And if I say it's a subject very close to my heart, I wonder what list of subjects you would consult. I say it's a subject that's very close to my heart. It's one of the things I talk about a lot. It's a very English conversation, or elements of it are a very English conversation. And it's one that I find absolutely fascinating. David Lammy has claimed that the Tories are not the right class of people to be running Britain because of their public school smallness. I subscribe to this school of thought so completely that I've even written a book about it. I don't know whether David Lammy has read this book or not, but some of the comments that he's made in his New Statesman article could have been lifted from it verbatim. Not verbatim, obviously, but could have been almost lifted from it verbatim. It's not the current book. It's not How They Broke Britain. It was the one before, How Not to Be Wrong. And Lammy writes, there was a sort of demob happiness about them, a sort of casual frippery. He's describing being at the Trooping the Colour ceremony with Johnson and Cameron and Cleverly. A sort of casual flippery, a certain kind of public school smallness, he told the New Statesman. They are not the class of people that Britain needs to run it now. And that's what my own life story tells me. He adds, the Labour Party is full of people. Angela Rayner, for instance, I was with her yesterday, campaigning in Mansfield. She gets this. I don't think David Lammy would argue that everybody who was privately educated deserves to be described in this way. He's describing a certain type of public school boy who has achieved a certain level of status within the Conservative Party. And I think he's right. I really do, particularly in the cases of Johnson and Cameron. But what really intrigued me about this was the way that people like that look to people who went to perfectly normal schools. Because I don't know. Nicholas Soames described it. Oh, no, it wasn't Nicholas Soames. It was someone else. It was another Tory, because Nicholas rang in. Nicholas Soames used to ring in as Nick from Westminster. And obviously within about 4 syllables, you knew exactly who it was because of his very distinctive manner of speech. I did enjoy talking to him. I think this might have been the last time he rang in. Quite a lot of you sending me clips, by the way, of Mikhail Gorbachev categorically rejecting the suggestion that there was any agreement not to enlarge NATO in the context of Russian or Ukrainian borders. So thank you for that. A reference to a caller at the end of the last hour. But we're moving on now to this question about class and Britain. The mystery is, the problem is, right, that the number of people who went to schools like mine in the positions of power and influence is absurd. I mean, it's absolutely absurd. You think that 7% of the population is privately educated. Goodness knows what percentage went to what I would describe loosely, at the risk of alienating huge swathes of my audience, proper public schools. The percentage is tiny, and yet when you see how that translates into top jobs in the judiciary, top jobs in politics, top jobs in the civil service, top jobs in the media, don't ever let the media off the hook. In this context, I'm part of the problem, not the solution. I like to think that by pointing it out and admitting that it's daft, you become a potential part of the solution, but your very existence in a job like this as a public school boy is part of the problem. We never stop to wonder what that looks like to people who went to normal schools. Do you see what I mean? I've got no idea what makes you know when someone like Boris Johnson walks into the room that he is a certain type of public schoolboy. And listen, I wish it didn't matter, but it does. So you can't ring me to tell me that it does. Well, you can ring me to tell me that it doesn't matter. But it does matter. I will disagree with you so strongly simply because of the cast list, because of the characters, the personnel who prove this. You know, the way that Boris Johnson and David Cameron behave, to George Osborne, Jacob Rees-Mogg, the way that they behave speaks to a background that 90+% of the population have absolutely no experience of. And it's got nothing to do really with wealth per se. Obviously, you need access to funds to send a child to one of these schools, more so now than ever. But the gulf between the child of the poorest parents in one of these schools and the child of the richest parents in one of these schools will be absolutely immeasurable. It will be absolutely enormous. The only thing they have in common financially is the ability to pay the school fees. Beyond that, they could be universes apart. They could be worlds apart. So when someone like Johnson or Cameron walk into government, they bring something that they don't even know that they've got. And they bring something that 90+% of the population can see. But I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is. What is it? 0345 6060 973 is the number that I want. Do you know what David Lammy is alluding to when he describes a certain kind of public school smallness? I'll have a go at telling you what I think it is, but I still don't know how you would spot it in a room. I think it can be a number of things. First and foremost is a form of emotional illiteracy built upon a psychological self-protection, so that everything is a game. It does two things, this. Everything is a game. It protects you from pain. Because if you get knocked down, in the words of those great political commentators, Chumbawamba, you get up again. You get up again. If you get knocked down, you get up again. A certain type of character, my age and older, white male, usually went to a school like this, they'll talk a lot about resilience. They'll be very sceptical about mental health issues, or they'll find it very hard to believe that young people can suffer from anxiety or depression because they have buried their own vulnerability so deep, in order to survive in these kind of schools. I get knocked down and I get up again. So that's the first thing it creates. I think when David Lammy talks about a certain type of public school smallness, he's talking about the way that everything is a game. Everything is a game. True or false? When Boris Johnson got COVID and was hospitalised, David Cameron said, don't worry, he'll be absolutely fine. I've seen him play tennis. True or false? That this kind of background could let one former Prime Minister conclude that another former Prime Minister with a potentially lethal virus would be absolutely fine because of the way he conducts himself on a tennis court. True or false? Yeah, all right, true, obviously. That is what he's talking about. That's the first thing it creates, is it means that everything is a game. The second thing it creates, which is an evolution, if you like, of the first point, a development of the first point, is that, and this I think is what Lammy is really touching on, is that they don't have to take anything seriously. That's why he brings Angela Rayner into the conversation. Angela Rayner wants to talk about aspiration or opportunity. She is talking from her soul because she is talking about herself, about her life. I don't think you need to have lived in poverty to be disgusted by poverty. But I think that if you live a life of levity, if everything is a game, even the things that you take seriously are not the issues themselves. It's getting one over on your rival from school. It's getting one over. It's not having to publicly admit that you're wrong. That is what I think is meant by this. So what I want you to tell me, I want people who didn't go to private school. This is relevant to the 20% conversation as well, where some people must have an unexhaustible supply of violins. The prospect of some people having to find a little bit more money to pay their school fees in 2025 has become a national tragedy in the eyes of some commentators. But it's relevant to this conversation. I want people who didn't go to private school to tell me what they see in the manner of people who did. And I think that's absolutely of a piece with David Lammy's comments to the New Statesman. Let me read them to you again. There was a sort of demob happiness about them, a sort of casual frippery, a certain kind of public school smallness. They are not the class of people that Britain needs to run it now. And that's what my own life story tells me. I can't agree with David Lammy that you need to have lived a hard knock life in order to have empathy or in order to want improvements for people from humbler backgrounds, because I'd be talking myself out of existence, out of my own convictions and ideologies and beliefs. I don't know that that's entirely what he means, but I do know that there is something about people like me or people who went to schools like mine that we remain completely unaware of, and yet which shines out to outsiders, to observers, to everybody else. And I want you to tell me what it is, all right? 0345 6060 973. I've heard it called public school swagger by a Tory, and I've heard it called public school smallness by a Labour politician. I guess they could both be right. But what do you think they are talking about?
James O'Brien on LBC.
21 minutes after 11. I just thought I'd have a little look at Farage's Twitter page to see if he was trying to peddle the idea that this character was somehow paid by Channel 4 to pretend to be a racist while hanging out with all the other canvassers in Clacton. And indeed he has. But something caught my eye on this one. He's talking about one of these events that he's doing around the country. He's written tickets selling fast. Is that a figure of speech, or is he charging people to attend his campaign events? He can't be doing that, can he? Are we sure? Good grief. Contempt for the conmen, compassion for the conde. He's literally charging people to watch him campaign to become an MP or to lead his party. Well, you live and learn. 22 minutes after 11. David Lammy talks about class, talks about public school smallness. Not that long ago, a Tory politician was talking about public school swagger and wondering whether you could somehow teach it to kids who didn't go to these kind of schools. What is it? James is in Didcot. James, what would you like to say?
Good morning, James.
Hello, James.
I'm extremely nervous. This is my first time calling you.
It's only me.
I'm so excused.
Nothing to be nervous about. I refuse to acknowledge your nervousness. Carry on.
Well, you'll probably hear it in my voice, but I'll try and make sense. So I'm a bit of a fraud, as in I did actually go to a boarding school, but only up until the age of 14.
Okay.
My dad became a vicar and could no longer afford the fees. And so I moved from... absolutely. I could write a book on that one. Yeah. But I went to the bog standard comprehensive school. I say bog standard, but it was actually a really, really good school.
Sure.
Just down the road from where we moved to in Northampton. When I was at boarding school, there was this air of kind of being entitled, of the fact that your parents could afford to send you there, the fact that you were receiving this privileged education, the fact that you were mingling with people who see themselves at the cream of society.
Yeah, but they'd balk at that. Well, I would balk at that description. Possibly not everybody would, but it doesn't mean it's not true, does it? You are imbued with the idea, even if it's dressed up in the language of luck. You're imbued with the idea that you're a cut above.
That's exactly it. And I was sort of oblivious to it to a degree, being immersed in it myself. And of course, everybody says they voted Conservative, and the idea was to preserve privilege, to preserve it, for the people who deserved it, and that could mean lots of things, I guess. I don't think it's necessarily raced. In fact, I don't think it was raced at all. But it just means, a certain breeding. Which is it sounds contradictory.
And what happened when you left? How did you? I mean, what happened when you took this smallness stroke swagger into the state school system?
I think you can guess.
No, I can't actually.
I'm not going to go into too much detail, because I could kind of talk about the day I started and the kind of shock, and feeling of not fitting in. But it coincided with a growth spurt. So and my mother couldn't afford me to buy me new trousers, so I ended up going from a very privileged school to being perhaps looking like the poorest person in the class with trousers at half mast.
Oh dear!
And so I was called
Rishi Sunak's they're called now.
Exactly, yeah. And I looked like I'd gone to the Build-A-Bear workshop for my clothes, and I just I come in with a schoolboy swagger, so to speak, but actually I'm looking a little silly. So I was a bit of a laughing stock as soon as I got there.
That is a baptism by fire. Did you change as a person?
Yes.
So you shed that veneer, because this is the whole point. It's a veneer of confidence.
Yes,
isn't it? And yet people keep the veneer in place for their entire lives unless they have experiences like yours, or in my case, a lot of therapy. The veneer works, but there will be circumstances, as you discovered, in which it is going to get either knocked off you or you're going to have to take it off you pretty sharpish, because in other contexts it's ridiculous. And I think that's what Lammy is driving at when he talks about them being the wrong class to run Britain. We are in a context now where that veneer is ridiculous at best and unhelpful at worst. That kind of everything's a game, jolly hockey sticks. I've seen him play tennis, I'll be fine. It's not in and of itself dangerous or damaging, but to have presided over the decline of recent years in this country without fully appreciating the gravity of it probably demands the kind of thing that we're talking about. 26 minutes after 11 is the time. Liz is in Bristol. Liz, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello,
so I was at Oxford in the 80s. I was a year above Boris, actually.
Good Lord.
Vaguely remember him, I know. And I came from a state school to study. Sorry, I'm slightly out of breath walking my dog.
That's okay.
But I just had to ring you with this.
Yes.
But, I came from a state school doing engineering and bumped into loads of old Etonians, Harrow, etc. I mean, obviously the best went to Eton, so they thought. Yes. And I was just trying to describe it to your producer. It was a confidence, but it could verge into arrogance.
Yes.
And also kind of a strength. And at that point in my life, some of them were my friends, and they'd say, say if we were talking about a maths question, I would I was quite clever doing an engineering degree, and they would say this, and I would question myself.
So they'd say something wrong with full confidence.
Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly. Yeah, and I would know, and then I'd be going back thinking, but that's right. And then say they suggested a restaurant, I'd tag along with that, etc., etc. And I think that's why they end up running the country, because people go along with it. Now, as I've evolved...
They must be. They're so certain of themselves that they must be right.
Yes.
And I wonder whether that's how Brexit got done, because you've got evidence of Boris Johnson lying. And yet, when he said, we're going to get Brexit done, folks, it's oven ready, you sort of subconsciously thought, well, he can't be lying as much as I think he is, because look how confident he is that he's telling the truth, if you like.
Yeah. And as you say, they think they can conquer COVID, they can conquer death, they can do anything.
Did the scales fall from your eyes, or has this been a sort of incremental, while still at university?
Yeah, it was incremental. At university, I played my own game and I got quite a good degree, so I didn't listen too much. Yeah, thank God for that. I think as life has gone on, there was one time when I bought a flat. They've got so many funny stories about them, and one of them, it's not Boris, but they are very successful people, more successful than I've been because of that confidence, which I could kick myself for, but never mind. But I was buying a flat, and one of them said, oh, typical you, buying at the, top of the market? And I said, I don't think so. And then it wasn't the top of the market. So do you see what I mean?
I do see exactly what you mean. In fact, I'm slightly worried by what you described, because Scott has sent me a message. He says, and I know Scott outside the studio, I should probably add that. He says, I knew one kid from public school when I was a teenager, and he had a particular way of arguing that would almost drive you to violence. It was something else entirely. Then years later, James, I heard your show, and I was like, oh my God, it's him.
Oh, no.
It wasn't him.
Oh, my God.
His friend was called Adam, just to be clear. But you do learn a sort of a refusal to back down, a refusal to ever even contemplate being wrong. And that is what creates the confidence, in a way, that you describe. The negative side of it, as opposed to the positive, because as we've said, and as we said with the last caller, with James in Didcot, the veneer really, really works. It can get you all the way to Downing Street, but when push comes to shove, or when the chips are really down, or whatever other cliche you prefer in this space, it can do untold harm, as we saw, I think, during COVID. Thank you, Liz. And thank you, Scott, I suppose. It's coming up to 11:30. Call it swagger, call it smallness. What does it look like to everybody else? Thomas Watts has your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
3 minutes after 11. So they've broken a little early on this one, but one character has already suggested that he or she may consider running for the Tory leadership after the election. What kind of a daredevil? What kind of a daredevil, fearless dude would contemplate that kind of position to adopt, particularly if they were fighting to retain a marginal seat? Well, I mean, it would take a very special kind of character, am I right? You'd have to be a bit of a superhero to be you'd have to be quite a hard man or woman to be contemplating taking on the mantle of leadership of the Tory party, talking about it before the election has even happened. I wonder if I'll do this as a hook and tease. I wonder if you can work out who it is. Here's a little clue.
What do you want to do if you're not an MP?
Skydiving, motorcycling, fast catamaran sailing.
I don't know if you've worked it out yet, but it appears there is an alternative path down which he might go if indeed there is he does remain an MP. And I had yesterday, before I was sadly taken away from you, I did have a wonderful contender for Unhinged Headline. And I think we can resurrect it again today. The other thing I had was a lovely story about a bloke who was going to base his vote on a belief that the Labour Party was about to start taxing condoms. But I don't know whether or not that story's now done the rounds enough for it to have failed to be a start. I shall find out. I don't know at 11:34 how we're going to talk about Joe Biden after 12 o'clock today. I've got a few ideas, but most people won't have watched the debate last night or listened to the debate last night. I don't know that you need to. I think you can probably glean from the clips alone that he can't fight the next election as the Democrat candidate. The man is too doddery, too fragile. And his fragility is such that it overshadows the epic dishonesty of Donald Trump. So I'm not quite sure how we're going to talk about it, but we will find a way to talk about it after 12. Before that, we're back to the question of what it looks like to everybody else, what David Lammy calls the public school smallness. what a Conservative politician who, frankly, by now I should have probably looked up, called the public school swagger. I think they're talking about the same thing, but the Tory sees it as a positive and the Labour politician sees it as a negative. I just wonder what you see when you see the thing that they are talking about. Sharon is in Waltham Forest. Sharon, what do you reckon?
Yeah, for me it's the difference between expectation, which is the private school expectation, versus a state school sort of a hope and us having to strive and really feel that that you're going to have to move something to change. Whereas I think with private school, a lot of people I've seen in my career and along the way, they just have this expectation, and so that sense of striving, it's almost like it will fall in their lap, really. And I do think it breeds into a bit of lack of empathy, because I think you have to, I think the thing about walking in someone else's shoes, I just don't think that they put themselves in that position because of that expectation. It's just a given that things are going to happen. I mean, I've heard someone basically get a job on the back of the school that they went to.
Yes, it happens less now, but it still happens.
Yeah, so I mean, it's very succinct for me, I'm afraid, but it's basically expectation and all that goes with it. And
but it's not. I mean, it's blithe. We need an adjective, doesn't it? It's a sort of blithe expectation. It's an unquestioning expectation. Because what fascinates me from someone who was educated on the other side of the divide that we're mapping today is how much of it we're not aware of. So, I mean, Eton is obviously the ultimate example where you can sit at Eton and say, I want to be Prime Minister, and there'll probably be 5 of you or 10 of you in your year who've got the same ambition. At a normal school, there probably wouldn't be anybody who said that, and if they did, they'd get a slap. At a school like mine, there might be 1 in every year or 1 in every 3 or 4 years. That's what you mean, that expectation coupled with belief. Because it will come true.
But what David Lammy is tapping into at the moment is that the country needs something more than just sort of almost hollow words which may or may not happen based on the fact that you feel you should have it. You actually need to go you need to go and do, you've got to strive. We're in a position now where, we actually are going to have to roll our sleeves up and do the work, and not just sit back and think, put your feet up on the desk and think, it's all going to come to me. And that's, I think, what I mean is it's just that private school does seem to turn people out to think you will have this. And I think that for most people, they just go along with that, and there's still a lot of people in certain sectors who are aligned with that because they've also come from the private schools, and so therefore it's slap on the back. We all
play the game. We all play the game. We're talking about weaponized entitlement, really, but entitlement's one of those words that's been used too much. It's almost lost its meaning. We just slap it around. I prefer expectation. It is entitlement that you're describing, but not from the outside. From the inside, it's expectation, isn't it? I just expect that. I expect to get a brilliant job.
They approach it as a given. That
birthright.
Is going to happen.
Birthright.
Yeah.
I love that. Thank you, Sharon. 11:39 is the time. It was Damien Hines who made the comment about public school swagger and suggested that you can fake it in order to get ahead. So the idea that you can achieve privilege through mimicry instead of having actual privilege. The more I think about that in retrospect, the dafter it becomes, the more tragic it becomes. I don't know what Damien Hines' background is, but to think that this sort of centuries of entrenched privilege can somehow be hacked by pretending that you've got it, by behaving as if you went to one of these schools. Every now and then someone will come along who can do it. That's a kind of Toad of Toad Hall tribute act. But generally speaking, it needs to be buried in your bones to work. But I still don't know what it looks like from the outside. Charlie's in Frian Barnet. What would you like to say, Charlie?
Oh, good morning. There's a couple of things. I spoke to your lady there, and I accidentally met a load of public school boys in Antigua when I was sailing.
Oh, yeah.
And what really brought it home to me was this bloke got thrown off a yacht for smoking crack, and I thought he'd be devastated. I see him the next day.
This taken quite a turn. Was he crew or was he a guest on the yacht?
He was crew.
Okay.
Because a lot of them they do crewing for the summer season over in the Caribbean, and he was laughing the next day because a friend of his dad had a boat in where was it, Trinidad, that they wanted to take back to Ocean Village in Southampton. And what it occurred to me at the time, it sort of hit me, that was the sort of, was it, epiphany?
Yeah.
The safety net. They've just grown up all their lives with safety nets. Yeah. And that's going to give you a feeling of invincibility. I grew up in Hackney with kids, they messed up once, they're banged up, or they're dead or something. But this kid, he just had safety nets all his life, which gave him an air. And the thing is, when you've got an air of invincibility, where you don't appear to give a monkeys, there's something appealing about that to people. Oh. There's something that appeals to people.
Draws you in.
The other thing I wanted to say, well, you know, you see people who don't seem to care, seem to be unaffected by anything.
Yeah.
You know, there's something appealing, there's something alluring about that. And the other thing I wanted to say, you've asked this question before, why do people from my background defer to the likes of Boris Johnson? My theory is this. I'm 61. Yeah. I grew up watching Second World War films where all the main protagonists had RP. Right. They all spoke like Boris Johnson. They all had posh accents.
Yes.
And I only found out 10 years ago it was blokes like me that was going up in the Spitfires. Right? And so I've fallen out with people I've known for 50 years. My daughter got a first-class degree in politics and international relations.
Right.
And I'm still bragging. And she got that interest of her dad, right?
Yeah.
I've fallen out with people I know for 50 years. They know I've been around this table for as long as they know me. They listened to Boris Johnson and Farage more than they trusted me. And I've got to be honest with you, James. I when I was younger, I was a lot angrier. Now I think we should ban public schools because of the damage it does to the people that go to them. And I think we should keep public school boys and girls out of public office because look what they've done.
I can't argue with much of what you've said, except to say, can we have a special dispensation for radio presenters?
Well, you know,
you're not. You're going there, aren't you, Charlie? You're going there.
No. I mean, you see it. You call it out. You see it. I have got one good friend who went to Eton,
right,
and he sees it too. And he's, you know, suitably
above. Well, it leads to being above the law, doesn't it? And that's how some of the behaviours of Johnson in Downing Street make perfect sense. I just want to read you some of the messages that have come in while you've been talking. Mitchell, who tells us he's 65, says, great caller, this safety net business, he's bang on. Lister says, this caller is spot on. Karen says, this fella's got it. Charlie says, this guy has cracked it, excellent. Vasilis, this guy's nailed it. It's all about the safety belt. You've smashed it.
I've done a bit of radio in the past. If you want to give me a night slot, just give me a shout, mate. One thing I want to say about Rishi Sunak,
yes.
I think he's interesting. What defines him more than anything else, more than his ethnicity or his religion, is Winchester. Sometimes when I look at him, it looks like he's trying to please the top boy at his public school. Everything he does is just geared towards...
Waiting for a biscuit off headmaster or housemaster. Before you go, I just want to pick up on that deference issue a bit more, because as you correctly identify, Charlie, it's something that absolutely fascinates me. What I mean, is there anything you can do to break through it? You say you've actually fallen out with people because you talk like you talk and you tell the truth, and they talk like they talk and they tell lies, but your friends or your former friends will pick the lies, will choose the lies. Do you ever succeed? Do you ever win out?
I don't think... I mean, I remember reading about... that. I read this, and this resonated when I read that Ragged Trouser Philanthropist.
Yeah.
And the geezer was saying that... I mean, look, my nickname growing up was Lord Charles, because I used words with more than 2 syllables. And that was because I had books... I was lucky. I left school at 15, but there were books on the shelf.
Yeah, got it.
And I can remember... I've always loved books, and I've always been able to articulate myself. And I remember there's nothing I like better than seeing some public school's face drop when he realised he ain't talking to an idiot.
Yes.
Because the other thing is, when I was in Antigua, you know, the older you get, the more aware you are of the importance of what is in the air.
I hope so.
The air around people,
yes,
right?
Yes.
Well, I had to restrain myself when I meet these public school kids. Oh, mate, I'm not going to nick your wallet. It's palpable. You know, they bring these kids up. Kids from this background are being conditioned and believe that people from my background is going to smash them up or something. And the last thing I'd like to say, James, you know, when I talk to these conspiracy theorists, say, mate, in this country, it's not a conspiracy, it's a common interest. If you send these kids to the same school, guess what? They have the same fears, and that's key. So it doesn't have to be a conspiracy. It'd be a nod and a wink over lunch in St James. You know what I mean?
I do know what you mean, Charlie. Thank you, mate. As I say, an awful lot of love coming in for you on that analysis, and it was missing from the conversation so far. That sense of impunity, that sense of being above the law. It's not confined to the public school world. It's not confined to that. But goodness me, it is. It's there in spades, isn't it? That idea that, well, I'll be okay. I was just thinking as he spoke about, I got slung out of school. I thought my life was over in one sense, but I knew I'd still go to university. I knew I'd be able to find my way back. Whereas if I'd grown up in the circumstances Charlie described, that probably would have been it. Where would you go? To a pupil referral unit? Whatever the options would have been, that's an entirely class-based privilege that you didn't even notice. You don't even notice at the time. But from the outside, it's crystal clear. Charlie seeing it in 2020 vision. 11:47 is the time.
James O'Brien on LBC.
10 to 12. Anna says, to add to what Charlie said, is that the people who don't seem to care about anything are attractive because others think some of that carefreeness may rub off onto them. God, aren't words important? What's the difference between carelessness and carefreeness? But you're right to use the word carefreeness. You'd want that. And as Anna says, who wouldn't want a piece of that? The confidence also offers a form of security to those in their orbit. He was spot on. And Jamie in Colchester speaks for many of us when he says, what a world it is when people like Farage claim to speak for the working class instead of people like Charlie. And Alan takes it to another of my favourite subjects. I love this, where class and Brexit meet. I feel this attitude of impunity, he writes, was central to Britain's approach to Brexit negotiations. People leading it always believed that they would get their own way in the end, despite the EU's aims and intentions. That's public school all over. Pure arrogance. 11:51 is the time. This is so interesting, isn't it? And it is, and the fact longer the conversation goes on, the more important it becomes. I must remember to read you that quote from Cyril Connolly that is from over 100 years ago, or about 100 years ago, but absolutely nails down what it is that we are trying to describe. Craig's in Rotherham. Craig, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Very honoured to be on the show.
I'm very honoured to have you, Craig.
So I'm going to come at it from a sport perspective. So I'm born and bred in Workington, in West Cumbria. You might remember Workington Man from the last election.
Of course, yeah. Was that you?
Well, a little bit of it was me, but not the whole Farage link. So I was lucky enough to play cricket at a county schoolboy level all throughout my teens. And my age group at Cumbria were, working class state school lads. Our first two friendly matches before we played the other counties were always against Ampleforth and Sedbergh.
Never heard of it.
And I used to get so nervous before those matches. I used to both love it and hate it.
Why? What was it like coming to, for people who don't know, I went to Ampleforth, and the cricket pitch it's almost an oil painting. First of all,
incredible.
First of all, we have several, but there's a valley at the crest of which sits the school and the monastery, which is architecturally, parts of it are architecturally beautiful. But for a lad like you, what was it like coming up that drive in the minibus and seeing all of this stretch out in front of you? As a school, remember, not as a stately home, but as a school where you were going to play cricket.
It just felt so alien.
Yeah.
Really alien. It was out of a book or a TV show. It just didn't feel real, and due to some of the grounds that aesthetically nice in Cumbria, but not compared to these. And I used to dislike it because of the utter contempt that we felt directed towards us on the pitch.
Really?
And on the field, it was a very much, how dare you get me out? How dare you hit me?
You grubby little oik. I see. I'd love to tell you that that's not true, and that's not what they felt at all. But I can't convince you of that, and I can't say with full confidence that that's not true. They may well have felt like that. I could tell you I wouldn't have done, but then I wouldn't have got you out, to be honest. But I was nowhere near the cricket team. But yeah, that patrician disdain. Look, they were looking down their noses at you. You felt.
Yeah, very much so. And it was a look at the facilities we have. We've been told we're very good cricketers. We're told we're very good sportsmen. But we also there was a part of me that used to love playing against them, because one year we did beat them.
Fantastic.
A broken clock's right twice a day, right? But we did beat them, and almost the disbelief from them was palpable. It was, how have we lost? How could that have happened?
Yeah.
The simple, you're not allowed to beat us. You stay at school, grow a little oik, as it were.
Yeah.
But I have never felt, and even I play cricket to this day, and through all my adult life, I've still never felt that contempt on the pitch.
Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that, but I can believe it. I really can. And did you, in later life, if you encountered people, the grown-up versions of the lads you'd been playing against, could you spot it? Could you see it a mile off? Did you come across it again?
Yes, yeah. You still have that. The swagger, the arrogance, the almost who are you element of it. But thankfully, I've had quite a decent career, and I've got but a lot more confidence in myself to actually. I felt as though at the stage I couldn't compete with these kids at that age.
And we wouldn't know that. I mean, even if they were behaving abominably, and certainly, considering it was a monastic school, some of the ideas that we were given, including by monks, about the people who lived in the local village or people, I suppose by association, people like you, were unconscionable. It was one of the first things I started kicking back against, actually. But a lot of people wouldn't realise how obnoxious they were being. Jamie says he just had a flashback to Brideshead Revisited. Yeah, I mean, there is an element of that to it, but when you're in it, you don't notice it. And I wonder whether you notice it more if you're not born to it, if you're not to the manner born. So those of us that went to schools like that and were very, very conscious of the huge leap we were taking from our own backgrounds, from our own parents' socioeconomic status, you perhaps feel it more keenly, and then you can go one of two ways. You either become even worse than the average of what Craig describes. You become the biggest snob of all in order to cover up your own insecurities about your humbler background compared to some of your peers, or you become the chippy little the chippy little lefty. I won't leave any. I'll leave it hanging which way you think I went. Thank you, Craig. 11:56 is the time. I've got to deliver on that hook and tease. Who has thrown their hat into the ring to be a leader of the Conservative Party? I give you a clue again, just in case it's not clear to you yet.
What do you want to do if you're not an MP?
Skydiving, motorcycling, fast catamaran sailing.
What do you want to do if you are an MP? Lead the Conservative Party. Any ideas yet who that might be? Philip's in Stanmore. Philip, what made you pick up the phone?
Hello, James. Thanks for taking my call. It's a real pleasure to be on LBC.
It's a pleasure to talk to you. Yes.
Thank you. So very quickly, I had an interesting education in the sense that I went to a boarding school and my father paid for my education. But I shared classes with the other children from the towns and local villages. So it was a sort of boarding school within a comprehensive.
So your father paid for the boarding, not for the education?
Yeah, so there was a real distinction between the boarders and the non-boarders.
How interesting.
And then also there was a distinction between what can be termed as town and gown.
Yeah.
So as a boarder, we experienced exeat weekends. We had prep in the evening. We went to chapel. We called our teachers masters. We had wide games. Most of us were quite high achieving. I was rugby captain and in school plays and so forth. And that created an otherness compared to the children that obviously didn't go
grief.
To
even
the
in the same school. That's extraordinary, isn't it?
Well, I think it did. And the other issue is my parents lived and worked abroad. So when holidays came around, I would head off back to Hong Kong, Saudi Arabia, Thailand, Zimbabwe, wherever my father was living and working, and would come back with stories of all kinds of foreign adventures that most other kids were not part of. So not only did we have the town and gown element and border bashing that went on with the locals, but we also had that within the school where there was
strict hierarchies, strict socio-economic hierarchies even within the student body.
I think so, but the good news, though, is people were... I don't feel that the borders were particularly snobby in any way. We all sort of pretty much got on. But there was a feeling of difference, otherness. We did feel slightly different. I wouldn't want to call it, elitism or anything like that. But there was a distinction.
Well, it was elitism. We might not like the word, and you can't be culpable for it because it's centuries old in some elements. But it is a form of elitism, and I'm struck by what the last caller said about my school friends looking down their noses at him, and it would have happened. But they wouldn't have known they were doing it a lot of the time, or they wouldn't have thought there was anything wrong with it, which is an explanation, isn't it? Not an excuse.
Sure. I mean, maybe we didn't realise that we were sort of being set aside and seen differently, and maybe in retrospect, looking back on it, we were.
No, you're right. But also, mate, the absolute clincher is that we were never told to question it. Quite the opposite, in fact. That's the point. And that's why I always find it even odder that my school had such a sort of religious bent. Philip, thank you. What a great hour. Thank you. I don't know whether this is an eternally fascinating subject or whether by a process of radio osmosis I've managed to convey my fascination with it to you over the years. But I think Charlie's call probably proved that the more you think about our society, the more important questions like this become, leading him to the, I would argue, almost unassailable conclusion that the Labour Party is not going far enough with its 20% VAT plans, that they should really be seeking to eradicate this type of education entirely. We've got to talk about Joe Biden, but it's not going to be pretty.
James O'Brien on LBC.
4 minutes after 12 is the time, and so to America, where you think we've got a bit of a Hobson's choice in our looming election. Spare a thought for the Americans. Any attempts or hopes that Joe Biden would prove himself up to the task of running for what is, of course, arguably the most important job on the planet, I think left the building last night when his fragility, his simple air of fatigue and confusion became absolutely unignorable. The problem is that, of course, Donald Trump lied and lied and lied again. The adjudicated rapist and convicted criminal Donald Trump, who of course set a mob upon the seat of democracy in America itself with a bloodlust for his own vice president, and who continues to lie about the result of that election, it is somehow being overshadowed by the fragility of Joe Biden. But the somehow in that sentence isn't doing the work that you might expect it to be doing. It reached a point last night, I think, where the somehow became answerable. How is the fragility of Joe Biden overshadowing the obvious and catalogued corruption, moral, criminal, you name it, of Donald Trump? And the answer is because it's so great now. That the fragility is so clear. I don't know how much of it is also based on the fact that everybody knows how disgusting Donald Trump is. That's not an opinion, by the way. That's just fact. The Grimace clip, I think, that didn't get the coverage it deserves, or at least there's so much grossness out there that it's really, really hard to keep track of it. One of the worst things or interventions that I've heard him say involved his backstage trips at the Miss Universe pageant, where because he owned the franchise, he had access to the changing rooms where young girls would be getting changed. And I don't know if you've ever come across these comments about that, but they were, anyway, everyone knows how disgusting he is. So, and of course, as we were discussing in the first hour, some people are drawn to the disgustingness for reasons that will always remain slightly impenetrable to the rest of us. But everybody knows how disgusting Donald Trump is. So when Donald Trump stands up and is disgusting, it's a little bit dog bites man now, isn't it? It shouldn't be. It should never have been allowed to come to this. I haven't got the first idea how you could stop it, but it shouldn't have been allowed to come to this. But it has. So Donald Trump publicly lying, doing disgusting things, saying disgusting things, lying through his teeth, dog bites man. Joe Biden standing up and appearing on occasions to be almost oblivious of what he was supposed to be saying. That's man bites dog. The President of the United States of America struggling to maintain focus for, what was it, a 75-minute conversation, just over an hour, I think, maybe 90 minutes at the outside, doesn't really matter. And there's a problem here. I'll read this quickly because I haven't watched the whole thing, and this caller did. Please watch it in full before you let the media sway your opinion. Look at how Joe Biden dealt with the D-Day part and where he told Trump you have the morals of an alley cat in regards to the Stormy Daniels situation. I could list more, but all I can say is that the media over there is as reliable as the media over here. His age is really telling, and it's clear he is exhausted easily, but in his worst moment, he is better than his crooked opponent. I don't disagree with anything you said. I don't need to watch the whole thing. In some ways, you're picking up on the dog bites man, man bites dog bit of it. Of course he has the morals of an alley cat, but we all know that. You know, the court found his conduct in the Stormy Daniels case to be criminal. We all know that. Donald Trump stands up and is disgusting. It's dog bites man. Joe Biden stands up, and whether you want to describe it as tiring easily or struggling to keep his focus. And of course he's better. Of course you're much better off with an honest, fragile man surrounded by brilliant advisors than you are with a dishonest, disgusting man who's got his own problems with mental focus and is surrounded by deeply evil advisors. There's no... I mean, that
dealing with everything we have to do with... look, if... we finally beat Medicare.
Well, he's right. He did beat Medicare. He beat it to death, and he's destroying Medicare because all of these people are coming in. They're putting them on Medicare. They're putting them on Social Security. They're going to destroy Social Security.
So Trump's lies coming off the back of Joe Biden's, well, senior moment. So you get COVID. So it's somewhere in his head, the mental synapses... I'm not qualified to use words like that, but I'm using them metaphorically. The one that he reaches for when he thinks of COVID comes back and tells him to say Medicare. Immigration inevitably was a key flashpoint. The problem with the debate about immigration on both sides of the Atlantic is that the people who claim that they are most concerned about it are the people most drawn to the lies of political leaders. You need to define exactly what a problem is, whether or not there is a problem, and what the so-called solution to the problem will achieve in order to have an informed conversation. Or you just have to find a way of dealing with a demagogue. Anyway, this is the immigration element of last night's CNN presidential debate.
There are 40% fewer people coming across the border illegally. That's better than when he left office. And I'm going to continue to move until we get the total ban on the total initiative relative to what we can do with more Border Patrol and more asylum officers.
I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. I don't think he knows what he said either.
And then finally, both of them were asked during the CNN presidential debate about concerns regarding their own age.
I spent half my career being criticized as being the youngest person in politics. I was the second youngest person ever elected to the United States Senate, and now I'm the oldest. This guy's 3 years younger and a lot less competent. I think that just look at the record. Look at what I've done. Look how I've turned around the horrible situation he left me.
Well, I took 2 tests, cognitive tests. I aced them. We made it public. He took none. I'd like to see him take one, just one, a real easy one. Like go through the first 5 questions. He couldn't do it.
And you remember the Trump comments about the cognitive test? Is that the one where he went door camera or something like that? I mean, to be losing to Trump on that front is disastrous. And then for reasons I'm not entirely clear about, they decided to talk about, well, they ended up talking about golf.
Look, I'd be happy to have a driving contest with him. The reason I got my handicap, which when I was vice president, down to a 6. By the way, I told you before, I'm happy to play golf if you carry your own bag. Think you can do it?
That's the biggest lie that he's a 6 handicap of all.
I was an 8 handicap.
Yeah.
But I had, how many...
I've seen you swing. I know you swing.
What? So for many people listening, that will be the first time you've heard the clips. And I think that the message I got telling me to listen to the whole debate as opposed to the clips, although coming from a good place, I suspect that that's it, isn't it? I mean, when is the election? November. So July was the best part of 6 months still to go. I wasn't quite sure how to do this conversation. I'm still not, to be honest with you. We've spent so much time together over the years. Sometimes I just know something's important enough for me to throw it up in the air, and then we'll work out how we're going to talk about it. It was cameraman, woman, TV, that's right. I was drawn to the idea of telling someone you love that they have to stop doing something they love. I don't know why I was drawn to that. We had some incredible conversations not long ago, a couple of years ago, about telling your dad or your mum that they can't drive anymore, for example, telling them that you had to take the keys away because they were just not safe, even though they couldn't see it themselves. I don't know that that's appropriate. I feel we should be actually dealing with the specifics of the situation. But what are the specifics of the situation? It's not to do with the number. It's not to do with age. I think Bernie Sanders is even older than Joe Biden, isn't he? I had the pleasure of sitting down with Bernie not long ago, and he is as sharp as the proverbial tack. He'd run rings around any of them. So it's not that. I don't think he can run as president, or I don't think he can beat Donald Trump if he behaves like that for the next 6 months, or if that. I mean, what do? Stick him in a box? You know, back in the day, didn't they manage to keep FDR's disability secret? Was it a consequence of polio? Had he had polio as a child, Franklin Delano Roosevelt? I've seen his car, would you believe, and it had a machine in it because he could only drive one-handed, but he was also a chain smoker. So he sort of had a machine that would roll him a cigarette while he was driving his car one-handed. But they managed his media appearances so successfully and so carefully that the vast majority of the American public had no idea that he carried a disability as a consequence of having polio as a child. You couldn't do that with Biden, could you? You couldn't just keep him away from the public. So we may get on. I'm sad, not disappointed. I'm not disappointed in Biden. You can't help getting old. I'm sad in the sense that I don't want a rapist liar, a fascist rapist to be president of the United States of America. I don't think that's a particularly controversial position, although I'm sure that Johnny Bunch of Numbers will be outraged at the description of their hero as, well, he is an adjudicated rapist. He is a convicted criminal. He is somebody proven to have lied about almost everything and to have unleashed a murderous mob on his own vice president, effectively. But some people still like it. So that's why it's terrible that Joe Biden doesn't appear up to the job. I am still a little bit drawn to the idea of how do you if you're Joe Biden's mate, if you're Barack Obama, if you're Jill Biden, although some of the analysis I've read suggests that it's her deep love of being first lady that partly informs Biden's determination to hang on. That's probably gossip. How do you have that conversation? What do you do? How do you do it? How do you say? Can't do it. You can't do it, Dad. You can't do it, darling. You can't do it. I don't know how you do that. So we may do that together. But what we'll do first, 0345 6060 973. What we'll do first is ask how this happened. I didn't watch the debate the other day on the telly, the one that Michelle Hussein did. I saw bits of it. She's just brilliant. I could watch her all day, but I was doing something else. I can't remember what, but I'm sure it was very important. But all of the weirdos were jumping up and down about some bloke who stood up and accused them both of being awful. He was like your Uncle Keith's Facebook page made flesh. You know exactly that kind of character. It's the kind of people leave the pub when he comes in. But for reasons I'm not entirely clear about, I think it had something to do with the fact that pollsters chose the question rather than actual journalists or producers. So he stands up and says, is this really the best that the country has to offer? And you're looking at Starmer and Sunak, and all the bozos in the audience start clapping. Absolutely ridiculous. But in America, they'd have a point, wouldn't they? You watch that debate. You watch a good man who's clearly not up to it anymore, and a very bad man who in many ways needs to become president in order to exonerate himself of all the crimes that he's committed. And how the hell has America ended up with that choice? 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. Have a crack at it for me. I don't quite get it. In many ways, I don't get it at all. I know that Trump has hijacked the entire Republican Party, but you'd still think somebody might have put up a little bit of opposition, given what happened on January the 6th, never mind what's happened in courtrooms in New York and elsewhere. Given what's happened on January the 6th, how the hell is he still running? And given what we hear there in, I think, tragic clarity, how on earth is Joe Biden preparing to fight this election in November? It's 20 past 12, give or take. There'll be people listening in America. There'll be people listening elsewhere with a better understanding of American politics than I have. But the question is, it's unavoidable, isn't it? How the hell has this happened?
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 21 minutes after 12, and it is, I think, the end of the road for Joe Biden, isn't it? So how has America ended up with this Hobson's choice, with this absurd contest between the unspeakable and the... I could have done really well there if I'd had a word on the tip of my tongue to describe Joe Biden as an ubble. I'll go with unbelievable, the unspeakable and the unbelievable. Daniel's in the Cotswolds. Daniel, what would you like to say?
Afternoon, James. Long-time listener of the show. I think the problem that you're seeing right now with the reaction to Joe Biden is it's just bringing up the sentiment from 4 years ago, which for a lot of Democratic voters like myself, Joe Biden was never really our first choice to begin with. And so there was already a lot of shaky confidence in him going into this rematch, I guess, with Donald Trump. And I think last night he really had the task of, putting the party faithful at ease that he was still up to not only the job of the presidency, but campaigning against somebody as dangerous as Donald Trump. And I think by all accounts, he really failed. It's possibly not fair, but you can't discount that he's also the oldest president in history, that he would be in his mid-80s by the time he finished his second term. And so I think for a lot of people who are already nervous about how he was going to fare in a general election matchup with Donald Trump again, I don't think he did a lot to instill confidence in people going into the election in November.
Oh, quite the opposite. And of course, for people who say age is just a number, these outtakes, these moments, and there were more of them than we've listened to. They explode the notion. I mean, age is just a number, but fragility is not. Losing your thread is not. The moments where he really appeared to get his words mixed up, it's becoming indefensible, isn't it, this situation?
It really is. It's becoming a thing that you can't really, even if you respect Joe Biden, even if you like him personally, you can't ignore that even if somebody is older, this is the matchup that we're going to have.
Really?
So I think really I really do, yeah. So I think...
Why would they not tell? I mean, if it's so clear to so many that this would be disastrous, why would a managed convention not be welcomed by people, given that extraordinary circumstances call for extraordinary actions?
I don't disagree with you, but I think just because, at least to my knowledge, I don't know that there's been a brokered convention in most people's living memory. And I think it would send a bad message to people who are not as politically involved to say, like, the Democrats can't even... How are they supposed to lead the country when they can't even amongst themselves about, like, who the right choice for president should be? Look at how they're fighting amongst themselves. How are they supposed to lead the country? I mean, I feel like would be the argument.
What if they didn't fight among themselves? What if they got their act together and realised that one candidate rising unchallenged from the party would be the perfect replacement for Joe Biden? Is that impossible in American politics?
I think it is impossible in this current moment because it isn't clear who that person would be. I mean, you'd have certain people who would say, well, the obvious choice would be Kamala Harris, like the vice president, of course, right? But everything in American politics will tell you that America as a country is not ready to vote for a woman as president. They're even less likely to vote for a black woman as president. And I say that as a black man in America. Like, for better or worse, like, I know my country and I know where we are and where we're not yet. So, given that
personal polling adds to that as well, doesn't it? And so, what about Gavin Newsom or Pete Buttigieg? There's no character who really stands out as the obvious choice. And if it's not an obvious choice, then you've got a problem, haven't you?
You really do. I think the choice or the chance for this would have really come earlier in this year or in the start of last year, because Joe Biden campaigned in 2020 saying that he was going to be a transitional president.
That's true.
He was supposed to be a generationally transitional president. And so I think a lot of people, myself included, thought that he was going to run a substantive first term and then step aside and let the next generation of Democratic Party leaders figure out amongst themselves who the standard bearer would be. And then you could have made the case for a Raphael Warnock. You could have made a case for a Gretchen Whitmer or a Gavin Newsom. But I think that time has come and gone.
Oh, I hope not. How scared are you?
I mean, my wife and I are on holiday in the Cotswolds right now, and I was asking my friends back in America, I'm like, should we just extend our stay until 2025? Like, what is it's not great.
No.
You know, but I mean, I think we're all still very committed to making sure that Donald Trump doesn't become president. But I think after last night, it's very apparent
that's very, very difficult.
Than it needed to be.
Could you say the name of that politician whose name I just completely butchered for me, just for future reference?
Oh, Pete Buttigieg?
Buttigieg, thank you. I think I called him Buttigieg, which is not not helpful at all. Thank you for not laughing at me or Buttigieg.
No, not a problem.
Pete Buttigieg.
Yeah.
Well, Daniel, enjoy your stay and thank you. I'm very touched that you listen to me in America and still listen to me when you're over here on your holidays. I hope you don't have to stay in the Cotswolds for another presidential term, but it's not looking good, is it? It's coming up to 12:30. More of your calls on this. Gay in Bath will be up first after the news headlines. After that, of course, it could be you. I quite like this message. I wonder what it's like to go to a dinner party with James when every 7 to 8 minutes he says 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. Mid-sentence. I don't do that in real life. Have I done it with you? When? I've done it once, I think, when I caught myself doing it, and I did it with Theo, didn't I, as well, talking once in the middle of a conversation, and we weren't even taking calls. But no, I'm generally okay on that. If it was Joe Biden, you sensed last night he'd have been saying the phone number all over the place without any particular need to. It's coming up to 12:30, and Amelia Cox is here now with your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
33 minutes after 12 is the time. It's not pretty. The prospects for the next American election. What's the best word to use for? I think untenable is pretty good, isn't it? Unsustainable. The unspeakable versus the untenable. The unspeakable versus the unsustainable. I don't know what the answer is, and I don't know, as Daniel just demonstrated, I don't really know enough about American politics to know really what the options are, but I can't currently sit here and say that I can imagine Joe Biden being the Democrat contender in the next presidential election because he is so clearly unfit for purpose. Gay is in Bath. Gay, what would you like to say?
Well, I'm probably going to go down with Bidenitis myself because I'm talking to you. I missed the first 5 minutes and then wished I'd stayed asleep because it was a bit toe curling. But it must be very difficult for somebody that's been doing a job for 3.5 years and knows that Donald Trump will take the credit and is taking credit for things he hasn't done himself, but Joe Biden's done. He lied continually through it. And then he sort of went straight for the jugular when he was went for his dead sons, because he was talking about suckers and losers. Right. Only suckers and losers die in war. Jeez. And then he brought up
His son didn't die in war, did he? He died in a car.
No.
Sorry.
But no, his first wife and daughter were killed in a car crash. The two sons were injured. Then when Beau Biden was in Afghanistan, he was was close to a burn pit, I think, and he got glioblastoma.
Right.
So he died after that.
Oh, I see.
So,
okay.
So he then had all this stuff about losers, which he'd completely denied about last night. And then he was talking about the other son and his court case and his computer. And you think, whatever you do, the one thing he stood by his sons. Donald Trump.
But this is dog bites man. This is Donald Trump being disgusting. I think that Joe Biden and others have expressed the view that the brain tumour that Beau Biden suffered from may have been a consequence of exposure to burn pits in Afghanistan. I don't think it just for the detail.
Yeah.
More urgent that they put someone against him who can land punches, and Biden didn't really land any.
Yeah, but I think in too many cases the Democrats seem to be a bit too nice.
Yeah.
Pete Buttigieg is a really great guy, and Gretchen Whitmer's good, and he wasn't. The modifiers didn't keep him on track.
No, and the fact check came when everybody had moved along. The fact check came when everyone had tuned out. And the fact check found, I think Biden had a couple of scores against him on that as well. But the Trump stuff was like
but not Republican in charge of writing the paper. And Trump said, don't vote for it. So they all kowtowed and nothing happened.
Yeah.
So everybody's had a chance to get things done, and nobody will, because none of them have got.
Talk again, Gay. There's nothing on your. Just a taste, perhaps, of some of the lies that Donald Trump told last night. They've counted more than 30. Including planning to quadruple people's taxes, that the then House Speaker Nancy Pelosi turned down 10,000 National Guard troops for the US Capitol on January the 6th, that Americans don't pay the cost of his tariffs on China and other countries, that Europe accepts no American cars, that he is the president who got the Veterans' Choice Programme through Congress, and that fraud marred the results of the 2020 election. So those lies are epic. But it's a little bit like flooding the zone, isn't it? There's so many of them that you can't pin them down unless you're a brilliant operator. And in order to pin him down, if you can't rely upon the moderators, you're going to have to rely upon the opponent. And we've had a taste of how Joe Biden sounded last night. Mark's in Harrogate. Mark, what do you reckon?
Oh, good afternoon, James. Long-time listener, first-time caller.
Welcome, mate. Welcome.
Thank you very much indeed. So we're looking at two guys here, both looking at being essentially re-recruited, I guess, into the positions they've either got or had as CEOs of USA PLC, the biggest, let's say, company, in the world. You need a succession plan. And from the point of the Democratic Party, they've been somewhat negligent, I think, in terms of getting this succession plan lined up. We haven't got one. Well, they've got Kamala Harris this year, potential. I'm not.
But if he's not contemplating, the Constitution kicks in if he dies in office. So you don't need a succession plan for that. And if he's adamant that he's not going anywhere, succession plans look like treason.
True, but my other point would be that I can see within a degree of selfishness, and it's a horrible thing to say. A man of his age and perhaps isn't thinking clear. He could be just seen as a good one-term president and walk away, but there must be some degree of selfishness in his mind that says, I want to stick with this a little bit.
Unless none of us can think of a better option, in which case his conviction that he's the only one that can do it mitigates the accusation of selfishness.
Possibly, yeah, possibly. But is his mind, because he's older, he's less cognizant these days? I don't know. Is his mind slightly not thinking? I don't know.
It didn't look good.
I don't know what's in his mind.
No, it didn't look good. And at some point, he should be able to see that himself, which is why, in a different universe, this phone-in wouldn't actually have been about Joe Biden and Donald Trump. It would have been about how do you tell an elderly family member who you love that they have to stop driving, or that they have to, give up the control of the family business, or how do you do that? How do you tell someone if they can't see it themselves? How do you make them see it? I'm not sure you can.
Well, on a personal level, my dad died last year, and you could see his decline very quickly.
Yeah.
And we're looking at a guy here potentially who may go from, let's say, last night, if he's going to get the job, for 4.5 years, and that decline could be fast. But a job is an age thing, but it's also the assets as well. In the age aspect, he's not doing very well. He may be good in other things, but that is a massive box that currently, it can't.
I can't see it happening, but then I don't know if we're giving Daniel, I hope he's still listening, are we giving him too much kudos just because he's the first American to ring in and clearly knows his politics inside out? But the idea, what was the word that he used to describe the convention? What was it? Not negotiated convention. It was a great phrase, clearly something I should remember from my supposed A-level in UK and American politics, comparative UK-USA politics. So you used an adjective next to convention, like a negotiated or a managed convention. It'll come to me in a minute. It's good to know everyone was paying attention. Trump also asserted that the US currently has its biggest budget deficit and its biggest trade deficit with China. Both untrue, and both of those records, the biggest budget deficit and the biggest trade deficit, were actually achieved when he was president. And I think what Gay and Bath meant about Biden not lying with malice, he's got so far 9 identified false or misleading claims. He got his numbers wrong when describing 2 of his key Medicare policies. He was wrong when he said no US troops had been killed on his watch. The figure about billionaires' tax rates is misleading, and he baselessly claimed that Trump wants to eliminate Social Security. Trump's never actually said that. And then some falsehoods about the unemployment rate and about Border Patrol as well, although he later clarified the second one. How did it come to this is the question that we are struggling to... Brokered. There you go. Thank you. You can all stop sending me the word brokered now. I was kind of hoping someone on the payroll might have remembered that. Thank you, brokered. Yeah, better late than never. It's 12:45.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 12:47 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I don't know how much you know about Hope Not Hate. The work they do is absolutely extraordinary, up to and including saving the life of a serving MP, a story that was famously told in a recent ITV drama. But of course, an awful lot of the stuff that they do you won't know about. There are undercover operations going on all the time, trying to combat extremism, trying to combat fascism and its slow creep into polite society. It was set up by a chap who historically keeps quite a low profile, Nick Lowles, but he agreed to be interviewed by me for a full disclosure episode in which we go into quite a lot of depth about both the work that Hope Not Hate have done and indeed the reasons that drew him into a life of risk and danger, really, battling forces of rather obvious and eternally dangerous darkness. Here is a little flavour of this week's full disclosure with the Hope Not Hate founder, Nick Lowles. I guess the most formative experience of what your life has subsequently been dedicated to probably happened 7 years before you were born, in 1961, when your mum came here from Mauritius.
That's right, yeah. So she, like many other people who got brought up in the British Commonwealth, came to seek a better life over here. So she came with her brothers and sisters, and I think it was her experiences or things that happened to her when I was very young, growing up in Hounslow in the kind of 70s, that has probably shaped what I do now. I mean, I remember one occasion, my grandmother on my dad's side used to live in Surrey, and we didn't have a car in those days, and we would go to Shepherd's Bush to catch the I think it was a 715 Green Line bus to Guildford or something. And I remember one day, my mum, my sister and I were kind of walking to the bus station, and then she got abused on the street. And that
what
always
did they
say? The exact words, it was kind of, it was obviously kind of racist, it was kind of abusing her, sticking 2 fingers up at her, whatever. And then a couple of years after that, I grew up in a kind of political household with a small p. Yeah. So we'd always watch the news. My parents would always watch the news, and we'd watch the news in those days. And I remember the National Front Party political broadcast in 1979. Now, I had no concept of how small or big they were. It was, but I never forget them saying that they would send home people who weren't born in Britain within 6 months of winning the election. Now, at the age of 10 or whatever, or however I was then, it was kind of... It was a real fear.
Yeah.
It was a fear that my mum was going to get dragged and sent home. No idea that they had like 1.5% of the vote.
Doesn't matter because it's on the telly. It's in your house.
Totally,
it's in your
and it's
sitting
there.
room.
It's there.
Exactly.
And then when I was about 8 or 9, we moved to Shrewsbury, which was then a kind of a very white town, lovely place to grow up as a kid. But, and I remember at school in the early 1980s, there was kind of the British movement, which was even obviously more hardline than the National Front, said that they were going to have a march in Shrewsbury. And, a lot of the kind of lads at school, and the kind of who were involved in gangs started to kind of identify with the racism and everything. And, and again, it's like, I don't particularly look dark or whatever, but it was an absolute fear of mine. We used to go on holiday. I'd get tan very, very easily, very, very, very quickly. I would sit inside the tent. I'd pretend
you were worried about being dark-skinned.
Yeah, and then getting abused
and what
or
it would
whatever.
expose you to.
Yeah, and it's kind of, and it kind of haunted me in a way. And some, I look back now, and some of it was illogical, but that's how I felt at the time.
Doesn't matter, does it? 12:51 is the time. Nick Lowles there, the founder of Hope Not Hate, and still the sort of head honcho over there. Fascinating full disclosure into your second one, of course, Joe Mulhall, one of Nick's colleagues, also been a guest on Full Disclosure, and his book Journeys into the Far Right. Connor has just been in touch to say he bought it after listening to that interview. And it's absolutely brilliant. 12:51 is the time. We also did Matthew Collins, actually. We've done 3, haven't we? And Matthew wrote the story upon which the Stephen Graham drama was based in is it The Call-In? Was it called The Call-In? Forgive me, I haven't got I should have it all at my fingertips, but that was the story of how they dealt with not just a threat, but a really cogent plan to assassinate a serving MP, and the culprit now languishing in jail. It is 12:52. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where the conversation about Joe Biden continues. It's not gone well so far. Hang on, I'll give you a quick heads up on who this is.
What do you want to do if you're not an MP?
Skydiving, motorcycling, fast catamaran sailing.
What do you want to do if you are an MP? Steve Baker, the hard man of Brexit, is preparing a Tory leadership bid if he holds on to his marginal seat. I talked to you a few times about how many generations of leader they need to go through before they can rebuild the party around the idea that Brexit was a terrible mistake. That would suggest that they've got at least 1 or 2 more rounds to go before reality returns to the Conservative fold. Let's go to Seattle. Tristan is there. Tristan, what would you like to say?
Hello, James.
Hello.
Can you hear me okay?
Loud and clear. Wait, it's all good. Carry on.
Okay. Well, that's wonderful. I just don't understand the melodrama that's going on about Biden. I didn't watch the debate myself. That's kind of why I'm up at 10 to 5 in the morning. I went to sleep. So it was not something that I wanted to watch, and I did not. But I listened to those clips, and the clips that you played, and I watched some on YouTube this morning. I just don't understand, Biden wasn't saying anything controversial, and he wasn't, losing focus. He was kind of making gaps, but it's not like he was saying anything off the wall. He lost the focus a little bit, and I mean, that does happen with age. It's not uncommon.
But it wasn't a little bit. He got the words Medicare and COVID permanently mixed up for an entire segment, not just a misspeak that he then corrected. And I do think the more of it you watch, the harder it becomes to sustain the idea that this shouldn't be getting the level of attention that it's getting. No one's enjoying it, Tristan. No one's doing it from this side of the arguments. No one's doing it from a position of relish. Trump's lot will be doing plenty of that, but I think it's more dire than you realise. I really do.
I don't think so.
I want you to be right. I want you to be right. And I guess, how does he make it right? He has to do another one fairly soon and scotch all of these fears. Because just claiming it's a normal level of disengagement, I'm afraid, isn't going to work.
Yeah, well, I'm not saying that he did a great job.
No, I know.
But, first of all, Trump doesn't scare you. You haven't even talked about all the gaffes that Trump has made. Talk about, God bless the United States from a few years ago.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But they happen in a form of isolation. And you can watch a tape, a reel of Trump's bloopers, gaffes, misspeaks. There are certainly moments when he seems to lose the thread entirely, but it didn't happen last night. And the reason why they've put together these reel tapes is to bring together lots of examples of something, whereas Biden kind of provided his own in a form of real time. Tristan, thank you for the call. It wasn't a great phone line. I know we've done our best, but that's one of the reasons why I'll move on. Corrine is in Edinburgh. Corrine, what would you like to say?
Oh, God, I'm so glad you've managed to squeeze me in.
So am I now. Carry on. Carry on, Corrine.
I am on the left. But if I was undecided and somebody that knew nothing about politics, Trump clearly came out on top.
Yes.
If I was somebody that knew nothing,
because you don't know their lies. In large part of the reason is you wouldn't know that that long list of lies were actually lies.
Absolutely. And Biden wasn't capable of saying that is a lie and coming up with the actual facts. It was Tristan, God help him, and the Americans.
Well, to be fair, Tristan hadn't seen it. So
they have their heads in the sand. I think the Democrats have their head in the sand if they think they've got a chance against Trump after that debate.
Yeah, well, I do too.
And I think that is why everybody has to listen to Nick Lowles, because we are in a struggle against creeping fascism.
Best call ever. You just slipped in an advert for the Full Disclosure episode this week as well. But that is that's what's at stake here. And the beauty of your contribution is that you're saying if you didn't really know much about politics, you'd think Trump would come out on top. And then you've also thrown in the reason why that is not just a political phone-in topic. It's a matter of international urgency.
It is. And it is the creeping of this insipid fascism, which is attracting non-political people who are believing every word of it, and that's what terrifies me.
And that's why you need someone really on their A game to take it on.
Totally.
To take it on.
Totally. That's all I want to say, because I was listening to Rachel Maddow interviewing, the vice president. I'm a bit nervous.
But it's only me.
And it was just, she was doing her best, but she can't.
There's only so much you can do. And I'm reminded, I must have mentioned this to you before, of a million years ago when I judged the Student Radio Awards, and they did some form of hustings. And they had a fact checker in the studio, and they'd go to the fact checker periodically to say anything to report so far. It was in a student radio station. I remember saying in the speech that I inflicted on the poor little innocents, I remember saying that should be happening on TV. They should be doing that in all of our debates, and there's more evidence of the need for it. Well, it's a student radio station, so they wouldn't have had a massive operation, but CNN could afford to hire. They could have all of their fact checkers working in real time. And I'd give the last word to my old mate Mitch Benn, the comedian and musician and author and hand-wringing liberal. Americans Today, he writes on Twitter this morning, "Oh dear, the kindly old gentleman stumbled over his words. We shall have to vote for the one who's mad and evil." And there is some sense in that from Mitch, who hails, of course, from the same town as Sheila Fogarty. That's it from me for another day. We will be with you again on Monday morning from 10. If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on Catch Up on Global Player, the official LBC app, where you can also pause and rewind live radio. So download it now for free from your app store, or head to globalplayer.com. Coming up at 4 on LBC, it's Tom Swarbrick, but now with a normal-sized shift. I hope.
Yeah, it wasn't too bad. It was fine.
It's Sheila Fogarty.
James O'Brien on LBC.